Your mind is talking right now. Maybe it's critiquing these words. Maybe it's already drifted to something you said last week, to something you need to do tomorrow. Maybe it's quietly wondering if any of this will actually help. The mind doesn't wait for permission, it just goes. And you follow it. That's the part nobody talks about, not the thinking. Everyone thinks. It's the following, the automatic, exhausting, nearly invisible habit of chasing every thought down whatever corridor it opens until you surface 20 minutes later, heart slightly tighter, unsure exactly where you went. You were here, then you weren't. Most of us spend our entire lives inside our heads, mentally rehearsing conversations that never happen, revisiting moments we can't change, projecting catastrophes that may never arrive. We call it thinking, but a lot of the time it's something closer to being held hostage. Here's what changes everything. You can notice your thoughts, which means you are not them. You're not the voice in your head. You're the one who hears it. That single distinction, felt, not just understood, is the beginning of a different kind of life. Quieter, more grounded, more yours. This video is about what happens when you stop living inside the noise and start living from the place that was always beneath it. If that's what you're ready for, drop "I'm ready" in the comments, and let's begin. The mind that never clocks out. There's a particular kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You know the one. You wake up and within 30 seconds, sometimes less, the mind is already running. The list. The worry from last night that never got resolved. The thing someone said that you're still turning over. It starts before you've even decided to be awake, and it doesn't really stop until exhaustion finally pulls you under again at night. And even then, sometimes, it follows you into your dreams. This isn't a personal failure. This is just what an untrained mind does. Neuroscientists have a name for the brain system responsible for this. It's called the default mode network, a web of interconnected brain regions that activates whenever you're not focused on a specific task. Think of it as your brain's idle mode. When you're not actively engaged with something in the present moment, this network switches on automatically, and it does one thing above all else. It thinks about you, your past, your future, your relationships, your regrets, your fears, your unfinished business. It generates what researchers sometimes call self-referential thought, and in many people, it runs almost constantly. Here's what's striking about that. Studies suggest the average person spends nearly half their waking hours not thinking about what they're actually doing. Nearly half. You could be washing dishes and your mind is at a conversation from 3 days ago. You could be having dinner with someone you love and mentally you're already at tomorrow's meeting. The body shows up, the mind goes elsewhere. And the mind doesn't go to neutral places when it wanders. It has preferences. It gravitates toward the unresolved, the threatening, the incomplete. There's an evolutionary logic to this. A mind scanning for danger and problems kept our ancestors alive. But the modern world doesn't require that level of vigilance. And yet, the system doesn't know that. It's still running threat detection software in a world that mostly requires you to reply to emails. So you end up with a mind built for survival, operating in a context that demands something much quieter. And no one ever handed you the manual for how to work with that. The philosopher and spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle spent years trying to describe what it's like to be completely consumed by your own thinking. He called it being possessed by the mind, not in any mystical sense, but in the very practical sense that the mind runs you rather than the other way around. Most people, he observed, don't use their mind. Their mind uses them. Thoughts arise and they're believed. Stories form and they're inhabited. Judgments appear and they're mistaken for facts. You've probably experienced this without having the language for it. Someone sends you a short, slightly ambiguous message, and within seconds, your mind has constructed an entire narrative. They're upset with you. You did something wrong. Things are about to get complicated. The evidence for this narrative is basically non-existent, but it feels completely real because the mind tells it with such confidence, such detail, such emotional weight, and you follow it. Or you lie down to sleep and the mental replay begins. The conversation you had, but this time you say all the right things. The moment you wish you could take back, re-examined from every angle, as though understanding it perfectly will somehow change what happened. The future scenario played forward until it reaches its most catastrophic conclusion, so you can feel the dread of it now, before it's even arrived. As if pre-suffering it will somehow protect you. This is what psychologists call mental time travel. And while the ability to reflect on the past and plan for the future is genuinely one of the most remarkable things a human mind can do, there's a version of it that tips over into compulsion, where the mind isn't visiting the past to learn, it's going there to suffer. Where it isn't planning for the future, it's rehearsing disaster. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his private journals nearly 2,000 years ago, kept returning to one observation. The mind is where we live, and the mind is the one thing we actually have power over. Not circumstances, not other people, not outcomes, the mind. He wrote about it as though it were a discipline, something that required daily attention, daily redirection, daily practice. Not because he had conquered his mind, but precisely because he understood how easily it could conquer him. That's the honest starting point here. The mind that never clocks out isn't a sign of weakness or dysfunction. It's a sign that you're human, and that no one taught you how to work with the most powerful and most relentless thing you carry with you everywhere you go. But here's the turning point. Recognizing the pattern is not the same as being trapped by it. Something shifts the moment you can see what's happening, and that shift is where everything begins. What overthinking is actually costing you. Let's be honest about what's actually at stake here. Because it's easy to frame overthinking as merely inconvenient, an annoying mental habit that makes you a little anxious, a little tired, a little less fun at parties. But that framing lets you keep it at arm's length. It lets you acknowledge the problem without really feeling the weight of it. And the weight of it matters, because until you feel it clearly, there's no real urgency to change. So let's name what overthinking is actually taking from you. It's taking your time, not metaphorically, literally. Every hour spent mentally rehearsing a confrontation that never happens, or replaying a mistake that's already finished, or catastrophizing about a future that may never arrive, is an hour of your actual life that you were not present for. You can't get those hours back. Nobody gets a refund on time spent inside their head. And for many people, this isn't an occasional detour. It's the primary mode. Decades of life, filtered almost entirely through a commentary track that never stops. It's taking your relationships. Think about the last time you were in a conversation, but not really in it. Your body was there, nodding at the right moments, but your mind was somewhere else entirely, processing something that happened earlier, planning what to say next, evaluating how you're coming across, worrying about something completely unrelated. The person in front of you was speaking, and you weren't fully there to receive them. This happens more than most people want to admit. And the people in your life feel it, even when they can't name it. There's a quality of presence that's unmistakable when it's there and painfully obvious when it isn't. It's taking your body. Chronic overthinking isn't just a mental experience, it has a physical address. When the mind is constantly generating threat, the body responds accordingly. Cortisol rises, muscles tighten, the jaw clenches, the shoulders creep toward the ears. Breathing becomes shallow without you noticing. The nervous system, designed to spike into alertness during genuine danger and then return to rest, never fully gets to return to rest because the mind keeps generating the danger signal even when the body is perfectly safe. Over time, this wears things down. Sleep suffers, energy depletes. The body carries the weight of thoughts it was never meant to carry for this long. It's taking your creativity. This one is less obvious but just as real. Some of your best ideas, your most genuine impulses, your clearest sense of what you actually want, these don't tend to arrive through thinking harder. They arrive in the gaps, in the shower, on a walk, in that half-awake state between sleep and waking. They arrive when the mind quiets enough to let something else surface. But when the mind is always full, always running, always generating, those gaps close. And with them goes a kind of inner access that's hard to even describe until you've experienced its absence long enough to miss it. And then there's the subtler cost, the one that's hardest to quantify, but perhaps the most significant of all. Overthinking keeps you from yourself. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who developed what he called logotherapy, wrote about the space that exists between stimulus and response, that brief, crucial gap in which a human being can choose how to act rather than simply react. He believed that gap was the seat of human freedom, the place where meaning is made, where character is formed, where a person becomes who they decide to be rather than who their conditioning tells them to be. Overthinking collapses that gap. When the mind is operating on autopilot, reacting, spinning, catastrophizing, replaying, there's no space, just stimulus and then the habitual response, and then another stimulus and another response, all of it moving so fast that it feels like this is simply who you are. You mistake your thought patterns for your personality. You mistake your mental habits for fixed truths. You stop questioning the story because the story has become the air you breathe. Carl Jung put it plainly, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what unexamined overthinking does. It runs you. And because it's invisible, because it happens inside the thing you're using to look, it can run you for a very long time before you even realize it's happening. There's a word in Buddhist psychology that doesn't have a clean English translation, papanka. It refers to the mind's tendency to proliferate, to take a simple perception and spin it outward into an elaborate self-referential web of associations, judgments, and narratives. A small discomfort becomes a catastrophe. A mild criticism becomes evidence of unworthiness. A single uncertain moment becomes a reason to question everything. The ancient teachers identified this as one of the primary sources of human suffering, not the circumstances themselves, but the mental elaboration on top of them. You've felt this. You know exactly what it's like when a small thing becomes enormous inside your head, even while some part of you knows the elaboration isn't proportional to the reality. The cost of all of this is your actual life. Not a metaphorical life, the one happening right now, in real time, in the moments you keep missing because you're somewhere else in your mind. That's what's at stake. And that's why what comes next matters. Not as a nice idea, but as something genuinely necessary. You are not your thoughts. Here's the idea that changes everything. And like most true things, it's both simple and almost impossible to fully absorb the first time you hear it. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who is aware of them. Read that again, slowly. Not because the words are complicated, but because the mind will try to process it intellectually and file it away before you've actually felt what it's pointing at. And the feeling is the whole point. Think about it this way. Right now, you can notice that you're reading these words. You can notice if your attention wanders. You can notice thoughts arising, maybe a flicker of skepticism, maybe a memory that got loosely associated with something you just read, maybe a quiet hope that this is going somewhere useful. You're noticing all of that, which means there are two things happening simultaneously: thoughts and the awareness of thoughts. The thoughts are the content, the awareness is the container, and here's what matters. You are the container, not the content. This isn't mysticism. This is something you can verify in your own direct experience right now, if you're willing to try. For just a moment, stop reading and notice whatever thought arises next. Don't try to control it or judge it. Just watch for it. Wait for it the way you'd wait for the next car to pass on a quiet street. Whatever arrived, a worry, an image, a word, a sensation, something in you noticed it. That noticing, that's what you actually are, not the thought, the awareness behind the thought. Psychologists working within acceptance and commitment therapy, a well-researched approach to mental well-being, have a term for this capacity: cognitive diffusion. It describes the ability to step back from your thoughts rather than being fused with them. When you're fused with a thought, you experience it as reality. You don't have the thought, you are the thought. But when you defuse from it, you can see it as a thought, just a mental event, arising and passing, no more permanent or definitive than a cloud moving across a sky. The difference in lived experience between those two states is enormous. When you're fused with the thought, "I'm going to fail," that thought isn't a thought. It's a verdict. It colors every decision, shapes every interaction, generates a whole cascade of secondary thoughts that reinforce it. But when you can see that thought as a thought, when you can notice there's a fear of failure arising right now, it loses much of its grip. It's still there, but it no longer runs you. This is the insight that contemplative traditions across thousands of years have pointed toward, each in their own language. The Buddhist concept of witness consciousness, the part of you that can observe the mind without being swept away by it. The Stoic discipline of distinguishing what is up to us, and the first thing that is up to us, always, is how we relate to our own thinking. The Jungian idea that making the unconscious conscious is an act of liberation, not just understanding. What's remarkable is that modern neuroscience is beginning to map what these traditions described through introspection alone. When people engage in mindfulness-based practices rooted in exactly this capacity to observe thoughts rather than inhabit them, activity in the default mode network decreases. The mental chatter quiets, not because the thoughts stop, but because the relationship to them changes. The brain literally functions differently when you're inhabiting the observer perspective rather than being lost in the content of thinking. Now, here's the part that trips most people up. Learning that you're not your thoughts doesn't immediately feel like freedom. Often, the first response is something closer to confusion or even resistance, because you've spent so long inside your thoughts that the idea of stepping outside them can feel disorienting. Who are you without the narrative? What happens if you stop analyzing and planning and reviewing? Won't everything fall apart? This is the fear that keeps people stuck. The belief, usually unconscious, that the thinking is what's holding things together. That if you stop running the mental commentary, you'll somehow lose your grip on life. But notice what that belief is. It's a thought, and it can be witnessed too. The truth is that stepping back from your thoughts doesn't make you passive or detached. It makes you clearer. When you're not caught inside the mental noise, you actually respond to life more intelligently, not less. You see situations more accurately without the distortion of fear-driven stories. You make decisions from a quieter, more grounded place. You have access to something underneath the thinking, an intuition, a steadiness, a kind of knowing that doesn't announce itself loudly but is remarkably reliable when you learn to trust it. Marcus Aurelius understood this. For all his power as Emperor of Rome, a role that demanded constant decision-making under extraordinary pressure, he returned again and again in his journals to the same discipline. Observe your own mind. Don't be enslaved by it. The thoughts will come. Let them come. But remember who is watching. You are not the storm. You are the sky the storm moves through. That metaphor isn't just poetic. It's pointing at something real and accessible. Something you already have, not something you need to acquire. The sky doesn't fight the storm. It doesn't try to clear the clouds. It simply remains vast and undisturbed while everything moves through it. That quality of undisturbedness, of being present without being swept away, is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others aren't. It's a capacity, and like any capacity, it develops with practice. Which is exactly what comes next. The notice and name method. So how do you actually do this? Because insight without practice is just a nice idea, and you've probably had plenty of nice ideas about managing your mind that dissolved somewhere between the moment of clarity and the next stressful Tuesday. What's needed isn't more understanding. It's a simple, repeatable entry point into the observer perspective. Something you can use when the mind is running hard, when the anxiety is real, when the rumination has already been going for 20 minutes and you're not even sure how it started. The method is called notice and name. It's grounded in both cognitive behavioral research and contemplative practice, and it works. Not because it's complicated, but precisely because it isn't. Here's the core practice. When you notice your mind has been pulled into a thought, a worry, a replay, a spiral, a judgment, you do two things. First, you notice it. You step back, just slightly, and observe that a thought is happening, not the content of the thought so much as the fact of it. There's thinking happening. Second, you name it. Gently, without judgment, you label the type of thought you're having. Planning, worrying, replaying, criticizing, catastrophizing. Just a word or short phrase, a label, not a verdict. That's it. Notice, name, return. The return part is simply bringing your attention back to whatever is actually present, the sensation of your breath, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the sounds around you, the task in front of you. Not because the present moment is always thrilling, but because it's real. It's the only place your life is actually happening. Why does this work? Because naming a thought activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with rational thinking and self-regulation, while simultaneously reducing activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. In simple terms, labeling your emotional experience or mental activity creates a degree of separation between you and it. Neuroscientists call this affect labeling. What contemplatives have described for centuries as naming the demon has measurable neurological effects. The act of naming shifts you from being inside the experience to observing it, and that shift, even if it's only a few degrees, is enough to change everything. Let's walk through what this looks like in practice. You're lying in bed, unable to sleep. The mind starts in on tomorrow's presentation. You notice the tightening in your chest, the quickening of the mental pace. Before, this is the point where you'd follow the thread. Start mentally rehearsing, then evaluating, then imagining the worst, then trying to problem solve, then getting more wound up because you realize you can't solve it at 11 at night. The loop begins. With notice and name, you catch it earlier. You step back, even slightly, and you say quietly to yourself, worrying, not stop worrying, or you're being ridiculous, or everything will be fine, just worrying. You've named what's happening. You've stepped just outside it. You take a breath. You feel the bed beneath you. And then gently, you return. The mind may immediately kick the worry back up. That's completely fine. You're not trying to silence it. You just notice and name again. Worrying, breath, return. You may do this 10 times in a row, 15 times. That's not failure. That's the practice. Every time you notice, you're exercising the observer muscle. Every single return is a small act of freedom. Or consider this. You're in a conversation and something the other person says triggers a familiar sting. A feeling you recognize, maybe a sense of not being heard, maybe a flash of defensiveness. In the past, you'd have been inside that reaction before you knew it was happening. But now there's a fraction of a second where you can catch it. Reacting. That tiny moment of naming creates just enough space to choose your next move, rather than simply firing off the habitual response. Viktor Frankl called that space, between stimulus and response, the location of human freedom. Notice and name is a method for finding that space in real time. Some people find it helpful to add a slightly fuller label. I notice I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail. The extra structure, I notice I'm having the thought that, creates additional distance. It's the difference between I'm terrified and I notice there's fear present. Both acknowledge the experience, but the second one reminds you that there's a you doing the noticing that is separate from the fear itself. You can practice this anywhere, stuck in traffic, frustrating, scrolling your phone and feeling vaguely hollow, numbing, replaying an argument, replaying, worrying about money, worrying. You're not suppressing anything. You're not telling yourself to feel differently. You're simply taking one step back, far enough to see what's happening instead of just being what's happening. One important note, this practice is not about achieving a blank mind. The goal isn't to make your thoughts stop. The goal is to change your relationship to them. Thoughts will keep arising. That's what minds do. The shift is that you stop automatically following each one down the rabbit hole. You start having thoughts instead of being had by them. Over time, and this happens gradually, not overnight, the gaps between noticing and naming get shorter. The moments of observer awareness become more frequent, and something remarkable starts to happen. You begin to trust the quieter place beneath the noise. You realize it was always there, you just hadn't learned to rest in it yet. The mind doesn't have to be the enemy. It doesn't need to be conquered or silenced or fixed. It needs to be met with awareness, met from the perspective of the one who is watching rather than the one who is lost. You were never lost. You just forgot you were the sky. What life feels like on the other side. Nobody tells you that the shift, when it comes, doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic moment where the noise suddenly stops and peace descends like a curtain. It doesn't work that way. What actually happens is quieter and more surprising. You start to notice the spaces between thoughts more than the thoughts themselves. A small thing, a cup of coffee going warm in your hands, the particular quality of light through a window in the late afternoon, lands in a way it didn't before. Not because the moment is objectively more beautiful, but because you're actually there for it. This is the first thing that changes. You start arriving. People who've moved through this shift often describe it the same way, regardless of their background or the language they use for it. They say things like, "I don't know exactly when it changed, but one day I realized I was just here." Not somewhere else in their minds, not already halfway into tomorrow or halfway back into last week. Here, present, in contact with what's actually in front of them. And they describe that simple fact of presence as something close to extraordinary, not because anything in their external life has changed, but because the filter through which they experience it has. Your relationships begin to feel different. When you're not constantly lost in your own mental commentary, evaluating, comparing, planning your next response, you become genuinely available to the people in your life. You listen differently. You hear not just the words, but what's behind them, the hesitation, the hope, the thing the person is trying to say but hasn't quite found language for yet. And people feel it, not as a technique you're applying, but as a quality of attention. The people who matter to you will notice that something has changed, even if they can't name what it is. Connection deepens, not because you've become someone new, but because you're finally showing up as who you already were. Your body begins to exhale. The chronic low-grade tension that overthinking lives in, the tightened jaw, the held breath, the shoulders carrying weight they were never meant to carry, begins to release. Not all at once, gradually, in layers, as the nervous system learns that the threats were mostly internal and that the internal weather is starting to change. Sleep gets easier, not because your circumstances are more resolved, but because the mind isn't treating bedtime as an invitation to review everything that hasn't been figured out yet. You start waking up in the morning and staying in the first few conscious seconds a little longer, that quiet space before the mind kicks into gear, and finding that it's not uncomfortable there. It's actually kind of good. Decisions get clearer. This surprises most people. The assumption is that thinking more, analyzing more, considering every angle, running every scenario, produces better decisions. And up to a point that's true. But past that point, more thinking doesn't produce better decisions. It produces decision paralysis, second-guessing, and the exhausted feeling of having gone around the loop so many times you've lost touch with what you actually want. When the mind quiets, something else becomes audible. A quieter knowing, a felt sense of direction that doesn't arrive through logic alone. You start to trust that, and trusting it turns out to be remarkably effective. You also become less reactive. This isn't the same as becoming emotionally flat or indifferent. It means that the gap Viktor Frankl described between stimulus and response widens enough that you have a genuine choice. Someone says something sharp, and instead of the immediate flood of defensiveness, there's a breath, a moment of seeing, and then a response that actually reflects what you mean rather than what the fear or the ego reflexively produced. People around you may notice this before you do. They'll say you seem calmer, more measured, more like yourself. And then there's something harder to describe, but perhaps the most significant change of all. You start enjoying your own life. Not in some grandiose peak experience sense. In a very ordinary daily sense, the food actually tastes like something when you're eating it. The walk you take feels like a walk, not a moving platform for anxiety. The work you do has a quality of engagement rather than just completion. Small pleasures, music, conversation, sunlight, the specific texture of a familiar silence, register again. You realize quietly that you spent a long time not quite tasting any of it because you were always somewhere else. Eckhart Tolle wrote that most people don't realize that the present moment is all they ever have, not as a philosophical position, but as a direct, lived recognition. The past exists only as memory, which is a thought. The future exists only as anticipation, which is also a thought. The only place that life is actually occurring is now. And when you stop missing now by being somewhere else in your mind, you discover that now, ordinary, unglamorous, unremarkable now, has everything you were looking for. Peace isn't something you build. It isn't something you earn when your circumstances improve or when you've finally resolved every outstanding problem in your life. It's something you uncover, something that was always underneath the noise, waiting patiently for you to stop mistaking the weather for the sky. You are not your thoughts. You never were. You are the awareness that watches them arise, move through, and dissolve. And that awareness, still, clear, undisturbed at its core, is what you actually are. Come home to it. That's where the peace is. It always was. If you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own mind and start living from that quieter place inside you, leave a comment below. I choose presence. Carry that with you. And if this felt like exactly what you needed today, subscribe to The Stoic Mode and turn on notifications, because this conversation is only just getting started. Every video is another step back to yourself. Thank you for watching. Stay grounded.